I feel like I'm bringing like a new dog home or like a baby or something. Like I'm like, my room has to be clean for the iPad.
That's true, you didn't say that.
I remember reading an article when I was about 12 years old, I think it might have been in Scientific American, where they measured the efficiency of locomotion for all these species on planet Earth. How many kilocalories did they expend to get from point A to point B? And the condor one came in at the top of the list, surpassed everything else, and humans came in about a third of the way down the list, which was not such a great showing for Crown of Creation. And but somebody there had the imagination to test the efficiency of a human riding a bicycle. Human riding a bicycle blew away the condor, all the way off the top of the list. And it made a really big impression on me that we humans are tool builders, and that we can fashion tools that amplify these inherent abilities that we have to spectacular magnitudes. And so for me, a computer has always been a bicycle of the mind.
So I have a student that I work with who loves to draw. They're in 3rd grade and they're drawing all the time. Like, they draw in their notebooks, they draw on their spelling tests that they're not supposed to be drawing on, they draw. I have like a little notebook that I send with them to lunch so that they can draw on that. So they draw all the time, and I work with them every day. And there was this, earlier today, the student was supposed to be in the indoor recess instead of outdoor recess, so I went to go grab them from the playground. And usually that transition is like not very easy, but in the process of me trying to get them to come upstairs, I said, I'll show you something. And so I'm telling them, oh, I've been working on this animation, and I'll show you what I've done on my animation so far. And so they come up with me, and they like went pretty happily because they wanted to see what I was talking about. So we went upstairs and we sat down, and I pulled out my iPad, and I start pulling it out. I'm showing them the animation and I'm going, okay, I just started animating like literally a couple days ago, so it's really rocky. Don't judge me. It's gonna look better eventually. But they were like super excited about what I was showing them, and they were asking, did you draw that? And I'm like, yes, I used to use this app called Procreate. And so I pull up Procreate and we start drawing together, and I'm showing them all the different brushes, and like they were so excited about what I was showing them and the fact that this app exists. And this actually isn't the first student that I've shown this to. I showed a student the other day. I was trying to help them calm down a little bit, and I was like, what if we just draw together and whatever. And they were so curious about the app that they went and found a little piece of paper and had me write down Procreate, and I gave it to them so they could take it home and tell their mom about it. But the point is that as we're working on this together and we're drawing together and I'm showing them all these new things, I just like had this moment where I was looking at their face and they looked so in awe of what we were doing. They were like, it was wild that they could like use this pencil, and like I showed them the setting. They draw a lot of people, and so I was showing them that there's brushes on Procreate where you can just draw hair and it's like already embedded in that. And they were just like in awe and talking about how cool it was and how much they wanted to have one of these, and they were like, how much does it cost? And I was like, it's pretty expensive, so you're gonna want to save up for that one. It took me a little bit to save up for it, so we were being realistic about it, but they were like, oh my gosh, I want to have one of these so bad. And so I was encouraging them to like, well, you got to get your work done, and you got to graduate high school, and you got to do all these things, and then you can work in a job and you can save up some money and you can have one of these too, and you're going to create art on it because like you're a real artist and you can do this. And I just had a moment where I was looking at them being so amazed by this tool in the exact same way that I've now had the iPad for a week, and I felt exactly the same way that I felt watching them, where they're looking at it going, I can't believe this thing exists. And I bought it 1 week ago, and I also felt that exact same way. And when I was playing with Austin's before I bought one, that's how I felt. Like I was like, I cannot believe that I have all these ideas in my head, right? Like art ideas or writing or these different areas. And I can't believe that this tool exists that I can so easily access and like build and draw and create the things that I am like dreaming of, So yeah, I feel like a little kid using this device. So I've been trying to think about why I feel so in awe of the iPad as a device. And I think the first thing is that I've never had a device that was my primary computing device that was as fluid as the iPad is. I've been talking a lot with Austin about sort of the organization of it, and I don't have a lot of the background knowledge and context for how it like compares to Mac OS and how it compares. I mean, really my only frame of reference is for how it compares to my other computers. I've only ever had Windows computers before, and usually, and I've talked about, usually they were hand-me-down computers, and we're not like the top of the market when it came to computers. But in general, I would say something that I really valued in a computer, and that I actually had the misunderstanding that I didn't think that the MacBook could do split screen, and so I never wanted a MacBook because of it. I was like steadfast in that. I was like, I don't want a MacBook. I want to be able to split my screen, like how it's very easy on a Windows computer to split your screen. But the way that the iPad splits screens is very similar to the way that a Windows computer does it, and that was actually a really, honestly, kind of a deciding factor for me in being able to buy the iPad. But I would say that the way that the split screen function works on the iPad is much quicker and much more, I guess in some ways, sort of intuitive than it is on Windows computers that I've experienced. It's so fast that I can have these, especially it has the apps that I've most recently worked on. the time-based model of organization that the iPad has, right? Where I'll have these apps that I've been recently working on. I'll have Procreate, I'll have Procreate Dreams, I'll have like Canva, I'll have all these like different tools that I'm using, and I can just immediately swipe one in, and it's like such a quick process that I'm like find myself just like kind of in awe of how fast I'm able to do it and quickly those transitions happen. I would also say, in general, the structure of the iPad itself, right? Like, being able to have this device that, like, with a laptop, right? Like, I like the rigidity of a laptop. I like that it, like, sits up on your lap, right? I can be in bed, I can be out anywhere, and it just, like, sits up like this. And that was, like, kind of what initially made me not want to get an iPad, because I didn't want it to just be this, like, loose object that I would have to, like, prop up on something else or, like, get a stand for, which technically this is a stand, but it kind of, like, because it, like, magnetizes to it, it ends up feeling the same feeling as a laptop. But being able to actually have both of those things in one, I've found to be like so comfortable and easy for me to do. I am not bound to the keyboard, which especially because I am using this, honestly, at this point, kind of primarily for art. I would say like 60% of my usage is for art. But I'm able to like really easily take this off. And so when I was sharing the tablet with my student earlier, I like had a moment where we were drawing on it like this because I had been showing her my animation. And then I like popped it off. And I think that like she actually didn't realize that it wasn't a laptop until that moment that I popped it off and was like, we can draw flat on the table like this. And she was like, oh my God, that's so much easier. And I was like, yes, like I love that I can just like tweak the device, right? Like on a laptop, I would have to be like moving this upside down with me and like getting the different angles that I want. And it's both fluid in terms of like the actual like interface, right? Like I can like use my finger and move the screen around completely, whichever way I want to, but I also can move the physical device any way that I want to, which has felt like a pretty game changer for me when it comes to making art. And just like the flexibility of being able to take the keyboard on and off and be able to use the pencil, right? Like, and for me, the pencil is such a like precise tool that I've really never had before. Like I've used styluses before on tablets, but it didn't have the precision that the Apple Pencil, I've never experienced a stylus that had the precision of an Apple Pencil. And I was talking about it with that student earlier, where she was saying, yeah, this feels like a pencil. Like the harder that I press, the darker and the more like pronounced my lines are. And when I am light, it feels like you're just lightly drawing with a pencil. And like that feels to me very revolutionary. Something that I love about the iPad is I've found that, and I knew this from having an iPhone, right? And using apps and having all my apps, especially I love having them in their little folders. But having everything be in its own app and keeping them separate, for me, I don't think that I'm very organized when I use my devices, right? Like when I'm on my computer, I just open like 65 tabs and then they just stay open forever. And I'm like I'm one of those people where when I have an alarm, I set like an alarm for every 5 minutes of the whole day, and then I just go back and select the one that works for my time. And I think I do the same exact thing when it comes to my windows, is that I just like keep them open forever. And even though it does do that, like when I'm on Safari, right? Like it does have all of my tabs open, but it kind of doesn't feel like it, which is a weird thing to like about this, I think. But it's like they don't exist to me, because they're just like, Apple kind of hides them, like or the iPad, I guess, just kind of hides them. And it doesn't have all of these, like when I open my laptop, typically, if it hasn't restarted, I'll have like window, and then it'll like, I'll always have the notification that's like, your apps didn't close correctly. Do you want to reopen all of them? And that's the only time that I ever closed them down, was when I got that notification. I was like, I actually don't want to do that. And so what I like about this is that I like have this clean device that I come to every day. And this is maybe just like user error, right? But when I open it up, it just has these apps. And yes, if I swipe up, I can like see the apps that I had before, but having them in this like time-based organization system means that like these other things that I haven't done for a really long time, I kind of just forget about and don't have to use anymore. And they don't like get in the way of whatever I'm wanting to currently do, right? So that, for one, works super well for me. It makes it feel very fluid. I don't have to like think about previous things that I've done every time that I open my device. another thing that I think has, and this was like something that I really specifically wanted, is that I knew the way that Austin uses his focus modes, and I was like, it seemed so organized. And so I wanted to do it that way. And so literally the day that I bought it, I wanted him to help me set it up. And so now I feel like I haven't set up all my focus modes. I think that like I can even utilize it further, but I've just kind of like gotten a base level of using this in. But like right now I'm on my nothing. I think there's no focus mode on right now. But like if I turn on, for example, admin, for example, then it shifts it, and the only apps that I have on my screen are the things that I've used to like do my admin tasks, right? Like I have my bank app, I have my, I think this one is like my notes, any note-taking list things. I have my email, I have my things, right? That all kind of pop up. So when I'm in that mode and when I'm in that setting, I know like, okay, I'm in work mode, and it kind of helps me with like keeping my brain on the task of what I'm trying to do. And then if I switch, like I would say, again, I'm on my creative mode, like most of the time. So when I go to creative, it has all my art apps up. I have Procreate, I have Procreate Dreams. I even have this, I use Pinterest for a lot of inspiration. And so I have one of these up, and it changes this picture, which is really fun, because then, I don't know. It's very cool to have widgets that kind of like help influence my stuff, and it kind of like subconsciously helps me. But then I have my photos and my videos and all these different things. And even my reading apps I kind of put in there for my, which maybe I should move that. But having the focus modes, I think, and being able to like really personalize my device for like my different needs and my different sort of like realms and areas of my life, helps me lock into what I'm doing, right? And I know that like when I'm on my create one, it's going to be very easy for me to access things and the specific apps that I want without having to have everything on my thing, and also without having to like go to the side and like pull it out of here every single time. I know that I can just like set it up for it's like basically like having like a desktop or workspace that's specifically designed for a certain area or type of task. And I loved seeing that on yours, and so I wanted to do that. So another reason that I wanted an iPad was because of how frictionless it is. I had a lot of people when I was first talking about getting an iPad. I was explaining the reasons that I wanted it to like some of my friends and my family, talking about the benefits when it comes to making art and writing, and just generally I kind of knew that I wanted to have a sort of like a tablet, laptop, 2-in-1 kind of device. And in those conversations, I had a lot of people recommending things like the Surface Pro, which I know has it's like a super powerful computer. I know. I had people talking about Lenovo or like different sort of like tablet-like devices that you can connect to other computers. But the reason that I actually ended up going with the iPad over those options is that it was really important for me to have continuity across my devices. I had previously I do a lot of like inspiration hunting or like reference images or different things like that. I will find on my phone usually throughout the day, like while I'm at work or whatever. And I also just like to scroll Pinterest and different things like that on my phone. And so then what I end up doing is I download them, and then I would, because I was using this like clunky sort of like dinosaur Windows computer, I would email those photos to myself and then download them onto my computer, and then I'd upload from there onto whatever application I was using. And it was just sort of this like long-winded process that was like really, it would just like slow me down. It was very clunky. And so I wanted something that I already have an iPhone. I wanted to be able to download whatever the photo is that I have, like save to my gallery, and then like it's already on my laptop. There's not an extra step that I have to take. I don't have to email myself things, or like I can just share things so seamlessly between the iPad and my phone. And that felt very important to me, and really took it sort of beyond one of those other products for me. I also wanted to have the apps that I have available on my phone. I know that there's like some that are only potentially available for iPad. I'm not really sure, but like I only use Procreate on my iPad now. I don't use it I don't know if it's available on phones. But it really had never occurred to me, because drawing on a phone is so, like I just really never did it because it didn't feel easy to do, but is obviously like incredibly easy to do on the iPad. So I wanted to have a lot of those same apps that I have on my phone. Like I wanted my banking app to be on my computer. I wanted it to be really easy to like access these different like applications that I have always really seamlessly and easily entered on my phone. I also felt that it was important too, because the iPhone is really the only Mac or the only Apple product that I've really had. Like I have an Apple Watch, and I have like the AirPods and things like that. But I hadn't had a device that I was actually I've never had a MacBook. I've never had like any of the other kinds. So I haven't ever been able to like use FaceTime or use calling on any other device other than my phone. And I always, like, whenever I am FaceTiming somebody, I always have to like prop it up on like a little stand or like prop it up against a book, right? And like it's not bad. It works well. It works fine. Like people FaceTime from their phones for a reason, but for me, like the jump to being able to FaceTime from my iPad and being able to like switch between the two of them based on what is the most convenient for me was a huge factor behind wanting to have an Apple product specifically for my computing device. And just like it has a built-in stand. I don't have to like prop it up on things. It just is already there. And a really huge feature for me is that a lot of times I want to talk about my art or my certain projects that I'm working on with other people. Like I want to show Austin, I want to show some of my other friends, and being able to just like share my screen and just like immediately go right into it and show them the things that I'm working on from my computer is like huge. It's a game changer for me. Like I love being able to do that. So that's been really huge. And also just in general, this is actually something that we haven't really talked about, but being able to share play on my device has also been really fun because we do a lot of share play. We'll like listen to music at the same time together, or we have different, like we'll watch shows, different things like that. And previously I had only, because we were FaceTiming while doing it, like share play is through FaceTime, I'd only been able to do it from my phone. And so I couldn't use my phone for other things while we were share playing, which was ultimately fine, especially if it's like music. But being able to do it from my iPad has made it like way more convenient, and like it feels like I just like have expanded my ability to socialize so much in that sense. So I've had an iPad for a week now, and the biggest thing that I think that I've noticed is that I feel like I've unlocked this ability to get into a flow state faster and more reliably than I have ever in my whole life. And granted, right, like I'm excited about this thing. This is my first iPad. This is my first like real computing device that I've ever bought for myself. So I'm just like point blank excited. I'm excited to draw. I'm excited to like have so much technology at my fingertips, right? But I've never had a computer that was as flexible and as fluid and as frictionless as this one. And I think that has allowed me to like harness this ability to get into flow in a way that I've like really never been able to. Like I actually remember complaining to Austin about this a couple months ago, that like I was finding it so hard to get into a workflow when it came to making my art, when it came to like even doing admin tasks. Like I was struggling to get myself there because I was juggling so many different tools and devices, and like none of them were working really well. And like the thing about the iPad and the thing about Apple products in general is that like they just work like really well. There's no like extra steps. There's no like things that I have to think about to like make the pieces fit together. Like the design of it is for it to be easy, right? Like I showed it to an 8-year-old, and within like 20 minutes, this 8-year-old was using Procreate like almost as proficiently as I can, which I have only had it for a week, so it's not saying that much. But like there's so much that I feel like I'm able to access and so quickly. And like there's so many parts of it that I'm like, there's a learning curve. There's still things that I'm discovering. So despite it, I think, being like incredibly intuitive, there's a lot that I'm still figuring out. And like I've been trying to learn Procreate Dreams, and I'm like absolutely struggling because I'm still learning how to animate. But the fact that I can do that and then I can pick like different skills up like that is incredible to me. Like I think being able to access this flow state feels like possible finally, I think. Which is funny that like I'm able to get an iPad and now I can do that. But I think it was always there. I just didn't have the tools for it. And like I said at the beginning of this video, is that I really feel like a kid using this. Like I feel, and something that I've been talking to Austin about lately is that like, I think, you know, when we look back on childhood, a lot of people have like really positive, like nostalgic memories of childhood, because when we were kids, we were so present in what we were doing. Like we were like almost like constantly in a flow state because we were just like dialed in and locked into the things that we were doing, whether it was like playing video games or like playing with our friends outside or like bike riding or like drawing, like all these different things. Like we were so locked in, and a lot of times it's because we were learning something for the first time too. But I think that as an adult, you know, you kind of start to lose that as time goes on, right? Like you stop learning new things sometimes, and you stop like being really present in your day-to-day life. Like our thoughts drift and like we lose track of it. And I don't know. Yeah, for me, I think like being able to, I've been having like a hard time. I've been like making jokes about me being an iPad baby now because I like am actually struggling to pull myself away from the device at times because I just feel like I can do so much and there's so little time for me to get to do the things that I want to do. And to have that feeling again is really incredible. A big complaint that I've heard from people about iPads is like, what's the point of buying this device that's basically just a bigger version of my phone? And to that I'd say, like, I don't really get the problem. It operates almost exactly like my phone, right? Like, it's basically my phone, but better. A bigger version, a version that I can actually draw on, a version that, you know, like, is mobile in the same way as my phone. I can bring it anywhere. It has, like, crazy battery life. It's so intuitive to me, probably because I've been using an iPhone for years, right? So I like already have the background knowledge and context on how to use this thing. And so I'm already using it in more efficient ways than I ever really did with a Windows computer. And again, that's user error. So like, I know people who have used Windows computers to like their most ability and like the biggest capacity that they have. And that's great, but that's not really how I've ever used the device because I don't know how to. I think it would have taken a lot of learning and more knowledge of computers that I just didn't have, and that I honestly wasn't really interested in gaining. But my transition into having an iPad as my computer has been like seamless. It has happened so quickly. I feel like I like know how to use this in a way that I never knew how to use previous computers of mine. And something that Austin and I were talking about, and it's a quote from somebody that we don't know who it's from, but he'd heard somewhere like on a podcast or something, or a video that he'd seen was somebody was comparing design to a Pixar movie and saying that a good design works in the same way that Pixar will, right? It's easy to understand. It's simple enough for a child to understand, but it's complex enough for an adult to get something out of it. And I think that's been hugely true of my experience with the iPad, right? Like, it's easy enough for me to get things out of it, right? Like, I feel like my world, especially when it comes to art, has absolutely expanded. But I also could sit there with an 8-year-old today and like show them how to use it, and they picked it up like that. Like, it was so quick and so easy that pretty much everybody can get something out of it. And that's what feels like it's such a like accessible device to anybody. And what has made me like so happy with my purchase, I think. But yeah, so I would say that's the point of it. That was literally how it was designed, was that it was designed to be so easy to use, but so surprisingly powerful.